Hi, everybody, and welcome to another interview of Magnify Our Impact. And today I'm really chuffed to be talking to a lady called Elsbeth. And Elsbeth is the CEO of a wonderful charitable organization in South Africa, and she lives in my home in Johannesburg. So it's great to be able to talk to her here. And there's two major reasons why Elsbeth will give us great value today, I feel, and a lot more. But for me personally, Elsbeth runs a wonderful leadership organization in South Africa, which combines the two favorite things in my entire life from a commercial perspective. One is leadership and the other one is South Africa. So I'm very excited to be here with you, Elsbeth. And at the moment, you're CEO of this wonderful organization that I think you were talking to me about globally. It's an immensely powerful operation where, when we look at training and development in the world, which is has never been more needed than it is now, you globally, your organization has trained over 85,000 people worldwide. You were saying when we were chatting, your greatest strength is relationships, which right now we're in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. And, you know, I think there's an awful lot of people listening to this interview that feel that the number one thing that we need to do is to deepen our relationships now, not just from a community perspective, but also from a fundraising and commercial perspective, that everything has always been about relationships. And so what would be really powerful today is for me to ask you some questions about how you build that winning culture, how you build relationships, how you build a team that can go out there and make the impact that we all want to for our causes. So with no further ado, thank you so much for joining me today, Elsbeth.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Greg. Thanks for the opportunity. And it's nice to meet with a fellow South African in this new digitally enabled world who's sitting on the other side of the world. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So, Craig, just maybe to set some context for the remarks so that they land in a place of understanding a little bit more about what I do and about Common Purpose,
please.
And then perhaps we go into your questions. So, Common Purpose is a global organization, as you said, a charitable organization founded in the UK, but has been around now 30 years. And that's a story in its own right. You know, what kind of leadership enables an organization to last for 30 years and be growing? 85,000 alumni. I've been with Common Purpose myself since 2006, and I was appointed as CEO of the South African operation then. And then through structural rearrangements in the organization, my mandate shifted about 6 years ago to head our operations across the African continent. So, you know, a very, very different then focus and portfolio of activities. And we're an organization that really encourages leaders to focus on tackling challenges in society. So I would say that we're applied leadership specialists. We don't specialize in teaching concepts. We specialize in teaching leaders to act and to deliver in their practical, complex societal contexts and organizational contexts, really through engaging with other leaders, you know, extending relationships. So, yeah, I've had the pleasure of leading this organization for years, having started life as an applied mathematician. And so life does deal with some interesting changes along the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so, Elsbeth, thank you very much for that. I think that a great place to start is to understand more about your leadership, because I wholeheartedly believe that everything externally started internally. It started with a thought, started with an idea or a feeling or an internal experience. So when you were growing up, and you were starting your career or starting to think about it, what dreams and aspirations did you have for the world? Did you just take what's in front of you and make it a great opportunity, or did you always dream about making this level of difference than you do today?
Craig, I didn't dream about it at all. In fact, I had a very carefree childhood without these major aspirations, and I think very much part of my philosophy has been to take what's in front of me and to decide. In fact, I had a crisis years ago when I was early in my career as an applied mathematician, when some trainer talked about the Alice in Wonderland analogy. I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about, when the white rabbit runs past Alice and says, and wants to know the way. And Alice says to the white rabbit, well, where do you want to go? And the white rabbit says, I don't know. And then Alice says, well, it doesn't matter which way you set off. And the point the trainer was making was you need to know where you want to go. Otherwise, you're not destined to make anything of your life. And it's put me in a blue funk because I didn't have a big goal and an aspiration. And I've come to realize that an equally valid route is to take the situations that arise in your life as you go through, as if you're walking down a corridor and there are many doors, and decide which one you're going to walk through. So I tend to be someone now who evaluates the situation as it evolves and then chooses direction, rather than being guided by that big lodestar out there in the future. I'm after that. I've never been one of those people. What goes with this, Clive, is a sort of a driving energy to make the biggest impact possible in life. Okay, so I'm an astute and an acute custodian of my energy. I hate to waste my energy on things that I think will not make a difference. So when you take that point of departure, then you're always making decisions based on what's in front of you. Where can I make the biggest impact? Where can I use my energy most profoundly for most impact? That's why I'm in leadership development now.
And so, Elsbeth, is that something that you look at your energy every morning or on a daily basis, or you say to yourself, when the moment arises at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or next month or in a week's time, is it something that you have a routine to look at your energy and wake up every morning and say, okay, what is the priority today with regards to this tank of energy internally? Or is it just that you understand subconsciously that your life is very valuable and everybody that you spend your time with is valuable, so I need to use my resources wisely? Is it just a knowing that you have, or do you have a routine?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think the from time to time reevaluation of what am I doing, and is it still making sense, and does it still feel like I'm pushing in the direction that I believe is my direction of greatest impact. But then the other part of it is, in the moment, staying away from the energy thieves, the things that just consume and waste our energy. It could be relationships, it could be stress about a particular issue, so really just trying to carve out that stuff that can absolutely waste our energy. So it's kind of a mixture of two extreme opposite things, I think.
And so as we sit here today, I think everybody within our industry, or definitely most of us, whether it's that we're running a community interest company, a social enterprise, a charity, a commercial organization, we all want to make that impact. And you've mentioned a couple of times during the interview so far around, to maximize your impact or use it wisely. Just give me a definition. What is impact? What is impact?
Yeah. I think impact, again, I can define it. I like the word and. I'm very much in love with the word and. So not one thing or another, but both. So at one level, impact for me is helping individuals. So at the level of the individual, to make the great transition of seeing themselves as victims of circumstances to recognizing their agency. I am a master of my own destiny. I'm an architect of my own life. And I mean, we see this around us, folk who've had the most terrible hand that life has played them. And they emerge from it, someone who is completely in command of their own destiny. Others who have all the resources, but still regard themselves as victims. So I think there's huge impact in that transformation of individuals into that mindset. But I'm also very interested in the macro scale. The world is full of big systemic challenges. How do we help leaders to work together collaboratively to tackle some of these big systemic issues in society and make an impact to loosen the knots almost that we have got ourselves into in humanity, in our big global systems? So I'm interested in impact at both of those levels. And I think that the one is not possible without the other. No. This is a profound and in the world, I think.
I love that phrase, you're architect of your own life. And when you say that, I had a visual of me building, a structure where I've got my foundations and I've got my house and I'm building my own life where every day is built. And so you also mentioned about people that have been dealt a very difficult hand and, you know, take the choice between, well, this is how I see it. These weren't your words, but this is how I see what you've said, is the difference between saying, okay, I'm a victim of circumstance and, you know, poor me, I'm in a terrible situation. It's not my fault and I'll just have to stay here, as opposed to the other side saying, yeah, this is not great at all. How can I use my resources and the relationships around me and the skills that I have to be able to raise my life and design my life differently? So give us that bridge is very interesting for me. And I suppose, you know, for so many of us working in difficult environments, is give us some advice as to how you guide somebody from being in a space of a victim to being in a space of leadership. What are the 2 or 3 things that are absolutely key for the foundation of that change? What do they need to think? What do they need to do?
Yeah, I think one of the mechanisms that's really valuable is exposure, because I think most of us live in bubbles. We get sucked into these bubbles and they can be quite narrow and quite constraining, and we lack self-awareness. We don't notice anymore. And so encountering other people in conversations, and I've used this technique on myself in my own life when I've found myself at difficult points feeling like I was becoming a victim myself, notwithstanding the fact that I hold this awareness, it is still possible. Yeah, and so going and talking to different individuals who have different perspectives and just kind of breathing fresh and different air, I think is really, really valuable for sort of shaking you out of that space of stuckness almost. I think that one of the most profoundly important parts of leadership is self-awareness. And I think it's quite a hard thing to come by. Some folk have regular practices and so on and so forth, but developing, you talked about habits earlier. I think habits are really important. Developing routines that enable you to just call yourself to order, call yourself to awareness is vitally important. And I think leaders who don't do that are dangerous.
No, absolutely. And so you've obviously harnessed this ability, and as a, you know, you've been in a number of very challenging environments, and you know, now that you're for common purpose, you're looking after, you know, the continent. Sometimes I love saying that because it's like we're in charge of the whole of Africa, you know, but you know, you've got a much bigger role now. So that's different, right? To when we start off in a leadership role, we have 3 people or 10 people and we can see the guys and girls and we're around them. And then you go like this and you have remote teams, different countries, different time zones, different ways, different cultures, different languages, different backgrounds. And so talk to me about culture. How, because this is so vital for people listening to this. How do you, so I've got 2 examples. One is people are building a team. So you come into a role and you get to build a team or a culture yourself. So my first question is, when you get to build a team from scratch, what's important that you think about when you're building a culture? And my second question is, when you find yourself running a team where the culture has been built before you got there and the culture is toxic and very difficult, how do you make that shift when you've got a toxic environment, or not, maybe not toxic, but a very difficult, challenging environment? How do you help those guys to build a culture of connection and love when there's the opposite? So I've got 2 questions there.
Yeah, you ask difficult questions, Craig.
I know. I'm very good at it.
So culture, you know, the one about building it yourself from scratch is so much easier, obviously. So I think that for me, the fundamental tenets of a profoundly healthy culture are engagement. That everyone who is part of the team must feel a sense of ownership, a sense of involvement, a sense of their importance, a sense of their agency. I can come back to that word agency 1,000 times. And they're bought in this, and the excitement about what we're creating together and so on. And, so we can have a long conversation around how you create engagement. But I think transparency and good communication is vital so that there's a sense of trust. Just yesterday, we had a team meeting. We've just changed our forecast as an organization, our financial forecast for where we think we're going to land this year, and it ain't as pretty as it was. And that's not hidden from anyone. And we use the great R word in the conversation. Will there be retrenchments? Won't there? This is not a conversation to have behind your hand. It's on the table. Let's thrash it. Let's talk it. Let's etc. And so that builds a sense of everyone knowing we know where we are. It might not be pretty, but we know where we are, and etc. So I think engagement, critical, most vital part of culture, and building it through that kind of transparency and so on. When you inherit a space where that isn't there, etc., I think you can only chip away at it slowly through improving communications. And, just this morning, I had a very difficult conversation with a partner where where there are elements of culture that I think are quite tricky. And I keep going back to talk, and I keep going back to talk. And when I find that the emails are getting terse and crispy and with little undertones in them that are not healthy, I will pick up the phone and talk. And so, just building relationship, openness, the ability to confront issues and deal with them, the ability to have courageous conversations, that's fundamental. I think that's the only way that you can transform those environments.
Yeah. See, it wasn't a hard question. You nailed it immediately. I was born in Johannesburg, and I have been very lucky to come to Southern Africa a lot, and West Africa, I think 7 times, and East Africa a few times. So I haven't traveled as much as a lot of people in Africa, but I've seen a little bit of the continent. And for me, I'm biased, but I think without question, it's the most beautiful continent, and South Africa is the most beautiful country I've ever visited in my life. And it is, for me and for lots of people that have had the privilege of visiting Southern Africa, it has a soul and a spirit that is impossible to share in language. It gets inside you and it never leaves. And I think, so many people say everybody's got their favorite. So many people say, and they're right, for them, South America's the same, or Europe's the same, or Australasia, or wherever you are in the world, or India. We've all got this magical diversity of culture. But when you look at the learnings in Africa, the learnings that we in the West, what do you think? Let me just paraphrase this just a little bit more. I think I'm generalizing hugely, but I think in England, we're getting it back slowly sometimes, but we've lost our sense of community. Mm-hmm. We live in our own houses. Some of us don't even know who our neighbours are anymore. We go into the big cities, London, Manchester, Leeds, Glasgow, Aberdeen, go into these cities, and we don't smile at the person next door, all the time. And we're busy and, and we don't stop to give a, pint of milk to our next door neighbour. It's not like that enough. So I might have just given you the answer, but what do you think us, in the West can learn from, the community, the strength of community that lives in Africa? What do you think is the biggest lessons that we can learn, however difficult it is over there?
There's some obvious answers to this, but I'm going to start at a place that isn't perhaps so obvious, I think, and I love it, and that is the ability to be happy in all sorts of circumstances, even when they are very difficult. Driving through a village somewhere, they're youngsters, they're playing, they're carefree, they've got hardly a bean, and I don't want to romanticize poverty for one moment, or health challenges and issues, etc. But I think that is a deep strength on the continent, a sort of a gratitude and an openness of spirit and a happiness And it comes back to that master of your own destiny versus the victim of circumstance. Victimhood goes with grumpiness, it goes with sadness, it goes with anger, it goes with all that stuff. Whereas this master of your own destiny doesn't mean that you have a lot of money in the bank or a lot of education. It's a different thing. And so that a kind of that innate happiness, the ability to feel at peace and happy, even in very trying circumstances, independent of your circumstances, I think is something I respect enormously, and I think is really quite richly demonstrated across the continent.
Yes.
The other thing that you've alluded to already, obviously, is the community thing and the notion of Ubuntu. It's a word that is perhaps been overused in the African continent, but it's the mantra almost of the African continent. I am because you are, because we are together. So, I understand and appreciate. I obviously have Western origins. 200 years ago, my ancestors came to South Africa from the UK. And so there's a good deal of Western culture in me, and the appreciation of individual striving and individual effort and personal responsibility. I have deep appreciation for all of that, but I'm back to the word and, if I can combine that with a deeper appreciation of others. And just now, one of our team has been saying that members of her family are starting to face retrenchment and economic hardship, and she feels guilty, and she feels so difficult. The notion that she has a salary that's coming in every month, it's hard to be happy about what you have when another doesn't have the same. Sense of we are co-responsible. How can I sort of enjoy this mindlessly when others don't have it, because what can I do perhaps to bridge that? So that spirit of sharing, of co-responsibility, of community, I think is an enormous strength of the continent. If that is held on its own, I think it has dangers, because who is accountable? How
you have to stand on your own 2 feet. Yes.
So this between the notion of individual responsibility and this very deep strength of the continent, and one of the fundamental tenets of common purpose, not surprisingly, an organization with the name Common Purpose, we talk a lot about collaboration, and so. I think the possibilities of collaboration between the strong African ethos of community and what I've described as Western, being a strong focus on individualism, there's such power in that. And I think it's one of the things I find most exciting.
And, we've talked a little bit around difficulty. I'm interested in, there are so many big challenges. I think you mentioned it at a macro level earlier when we were chatting. You can look at deforestation and climate change and population growth and disease and all sorts of different challenges that we're faced with at a global level in our world. But if I was to ask you this question, what do you feel is the biggest challenge that we're all facing right now, and how can we manage this best or indeed overcome it?
Yeah, and it's a kind of, I hope this answer is not too abstract, but I would say systemic complexity. And why do I say systemic complexity? Is because, I've run leadership programs for a long time now, and I've had a number of extraordinary, impressive individuals come through the programs and encountered them. And then when they relocate themselves into the context of their organization, so often, especially in these large, complex organizations, it is so difficult to make a difference in that very, and I used an analogy earlier, I think, a rope tied up in knots, how do you begin to unravel this as an individual and so on? And so in some ways, this COVID time has been for me a time of great thoughtfulness, because some things have become so simplified in this time. Our lives in many ways have become so much more simplified. And I think that that's something that we really need to think about, is simplification. And how do we simplify wherever we can, rather than more and more complexity? perhaps part of this is that I came from a rural background in South Africa, a very, very simple home. Simplicity was the order of the day. And so I didn't grow up with a need for all of the complex systems that so many folk bring into their lives. We invite them in. So simplicity at the level of the individual, simplicity at the level of our institutions, to try and unravel this interconnected problem space that we live in. And as I say, I hope that's not too abstract an answer.
No, not at all. And I think this is what I've learned as well through these interviews and through the 8-9 weeks that we've been, in lockdown here, to give me space to be able to introspect and look at, how I can untangle things for myself and keep things simple and straightforward. Talk to me about the values which you feel run through Common Purpose that you'd like to share and grow and develop. What's most important at a values and beliefs level for an organization? So I think there's two things there. One is the values, which, if I speak again, and I generalize, I see values as the foundation of the house. It's in my heart. And I see beliefs as the rules as to which I demonstrate those values. What are the rules? But if you can give us an understanding of what do you feel are the core values right now going forward in Common Purpose, and what are the beliefs that help us to demonstrate those values that we need, the beliefs of excellence that you use within your organization?
So values, sure, these are so real for me in the organization. It's very, very easy to answer this question. The one is passionate. Okay, so that, and I think this is true for any leader, and we're trying to teach leaders. Remember, in Common Purpose, we're training leaders. If you're passionate about what you do, you tend to be extraordinarily powerful at doing it. And I know that circumstances sometimes in life corner people somewhat into environments that they are less passionate about. But I think the degree to which you can align with your passion is enormously powerful. And I think as an organization, we are a very passionate organization about what we do. The next word would be serious. So we have a very unusual leadership training model where we take folk out to visit institutions in society and leaders in society. So we use the phrase, the world is our classroom. And, often non-profit organizations are not considered serious and heavyweight organizations. This method of training is very unusual. Where's your exams? Where's your classroom? Where are your sets of notes, etc. So the notion that we're serious about what we do, perhaps another way of saying it is we believe in what we do, I think is very powerful and underpinning in the organization as well, because it rubs off. People realize you take yourself seriously, and so they take you seriously. The other word, which is a word I would sing from the rooftops, is the word real. I have no patience whatsoever for pretty faces that hide a whole lot behind them. And I actually use those words as we invite folk into the space of leadership learning together. I invite them to leave their pretty faces at home, and let's have the conversation, which is about the stuff you're losing sleep about at night, because the degree to which we can be real with each other, it creates that engagement. It creates the ability to unravel the knots, because we're talking about the stuff that is real, not a politically correct conversation, not a pretend conversation because we're protecting ourselves because we're afraid of A, B, and C consequences if we speak this truth. I say, speak your truth with positive intent, okay? And that unlocks so much opportunity. So serious, passionate, real. The last word I'd add is independent. I think that what we try to be in the world is a voice which can bring together often opposing factions, difference. We're almost seeing a time in which we withdraw into corners. Obviously, COVID has forced us to withdraw, but even before that, the Brexits, the choices that we've made of political leadership in many parts of the world, there is a sense in which, as humans, we have become a little bit overwhelmed by the complexity of the world, and we've withdrawn into pockets of similarity. And I think it's sad, because I think there's such enormous opportunity in difference and diversity, and learning the skill of embracing it and working with it constructively. Can we put the side of the balance sheet in our heads, in our hearts, and put it on the asset side of the balance sheet and learn the skills to be able to work with it rather than hiding from it, which is what we seem to be doing so profoundly in society. So, you know, those are some of the values that underpin the organization. You can hear I own them. You know,
yes,
I own them
you really do.
And that comes back to, that's again, you know, I think we are most powerful. Our energy is most well spent when we find the places to work where there's a deep alignment between who we truly are and what our professional role expects and requires of us.
Yeah, that's really powerful. So real passionate, independent leaders. And I love that. There's a few things that you've said, Elsbeth, that I know will stay with me for a very long time. One is that you know, the world's our classroom. I love that. I've seen that so many times in my career, you know, that when I've been so lucky to come to Africa and go to these remote communities in West Africa and go to the Amazon or India, I've been so lucky that they're the biggest teachers, aren't they? The biggest facilitators of change, real life. So that makes so much sense. And, you know, I'm excited to come and see what, you sound like you do amazing work in that way. So I'm super excited to learn more about how Common Purpose runs these leadership programs. It seems very powerful. I want to ask you also about fundraising, because I can't leave a conversation like this without asking you about that, because, you know, it's a vital and powerful and passionate vehicle that we use in order to one of the big gears that makes our car go forward. So with the ladies and gentlemen that are listening to this that are in fundraising or want to fundraise more and grow and develop the abundance financially within the organization, give us a couple of the most important things for us to think about when we want to make more money within the organization and get more money into the organization's hands so they can help more people. What's most important that we think about when we're fundraising?
So again, I started a place that perhaps is unusual. I think the word conviction. You know, I think if you're sitting in front of a keyboard writing a document which is intended for fundraising purpose, or standing in front of someone, the degree of conviction you convey about what it is that you do is exceptionally powerful. Passion speaks volumes. Conviction speaks volumes. So there's that piece. You know, we can get into the conversation, well, how do I arrive at that conviction? But let's not go there. Conviction, really, really important. Then I think innovation is another really important word. So, you know, we as an organization wanted to launch our first Pan-African leadership program years ago. And we spent 3 years trying to find the funding to do it. And we knocked on the door of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, and you name it, every other foundation across the African continent looking for the funding. Everyone says, wonderful idea, brilliant project, we need this in Africa. No, but we can't fund you because we fund X, Y, and Z things, you know. And so in the end, we found ourselves in a situation where we were approaching a corporate chairman. The person sent the proposal to the corporate social investment. They said, no, lovely idea, but we don't fund this. They sent it then to the HR department, and the HR department said, we desperately need this. We need to be able to send our staff on programs which are going to teach them cultural intelligence in the context of Africa, because Africans are very, very bad at moving around the continent and being effective. You know, South Africans have a notorious reputation around the continent. So so where that took us was down a completely different trajectory, was approaching HR departments and looking for training budgets to fund our leadership program instead of foundations. And so thinking out of the box around, is there a different way that I can do this? Instead of asking a funder for it, can I ask the person who's walking in the door to pay for it themselves, et cetera, et cetera. So conviction about what you do, and then trying different models. And again, I go back to talking to people. I find it's hard to dream up innovation sometimes in your own head. Some folks are great idea generations, but the degree to which you expose yourself to other folk, other institutions, other conversations with folk that you wouldn't normally engage with is the degree to which it feeds your idea generating capability. So I think that's really helpful. And I have the enormous benefit of colleagues around the world So I run the African
Yes.
operation autonomously, but I'm part of a global organization. And, you know, I've had the experience of calling the CEO at midnight and, you know, pouring out my heart about an initiative that's not working. And we'll sit together, and between midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning, it's as if she's taken off my pajamas and she's put a zipper down the front and chopped the left leg off and stuck it onto the right arm.
Yeah.
And I walk out an hour later and I think, geez, that was helpful, you know, because
Yes.
we can co-create. So sometimes we get stuck on our own. And I think getting stuck on your own, you know, no, many of us hold individual responsibility. You can't run away from the responsibility, but consulting and thinking together and helping each other in that co-generative way, I think can be really, really helpful around fundraising.
Yeah, absolutely. Elsbeth, thank you so much for your time. It's so great talking to you. Thank you very much. It was profound. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig, for the opportunity. And it was very thought-provoking to face your barrage. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.